All right, well, let's get started. I'd first like to introduce our KYR president, Mr. Lester Sanders. Lester?
All right, thank you, Lamont. Good afternoon, Kentucky Realtors. Are you leading each day like the leaders that you are? And for those of you joining us for the first time, I am Lester Sanders, your KYR president. Welcome again. Kentucky Realtors are excited to spend time with you. How are you and your loved ones doing during this pandemic? Are you taking care of yourself? I personally hope so. Your advisory group will actually address that in the upcoming town hall next week, where the conversation will include caring for the physical and mental health of yourself and those around you. We know that there's a lot of stress caused by this pandemic, and understanding the importance of good nutrition as well as it pertains to a healthy lifestyle. So everyone that says they're okay, we know that they're really not. And again, this session will be for you and for those around you as well. So make sure you mark your calendars for next Thursday session. But today, Kentucky Realtors continue to work and embrace more closely our commercial real estate family. We have assembled a diverse panel to engage and inform us just how commercial real estate is evolving, changing, and being affected overall. As our presidential advisory group continues to look at the present state of business, the future, and the bridge that will cross into the new normal. So we're honored to hear from this terrific panel with us today. First, we have Steve Rohlfing, certified public accountant, a licensed real estate agent, principal appraiser, and owner of Realty Research in Lexington. Then we have Andrew Holden, who's a CCIM, recognized as an expert in commercial and investment real estate, and he is the local market president with Park National Bank in Louisville, Kentucky. Next, Gantt Hill. Gant also is a CCIM and certified commercial investment member, that is, and also a recognized expert and owner of Gantt Hill and Associates. Then we have Madison Silver. Madison has his JD, an AICP, that is the American Institute of Certified Planners, and he's president of Malcolm Bryant Company based in Owensboro, Kentucky. Also joining us is Tim Brown, who is another recognized expert and managing partner with Hoagland Commercial Realtors, where he holds his CCIM. And then John Baughman, commercial lender with First Financial Bank in Louisville, Kentucky. And Kent Daly. Kent has his ACM, that is accredited commercial specialist, and a broker owner with RE/MAX affiliates covering Northern Kentucky and Ohio. A personal thanks to each of you for being here with us today. And with that, I will turn it over to our chair of the President Advisory Group, NAR Director, and KYR past President, Lamont Breland.
Thank you, Lester. Appreciate your leadership during this time and all that you're doing. So welcome, everybody. Kentucky Realtors. I want to remind you about the KYRrealtor.com website. We do have a COVID page there. If you go to KYRrealtors.com and just click right in the middle of the button, the middle is a button there for COVID-19. That page is updated daily, sometimes a couple times a day, depending on the information that we get. So kind of bookmark that. And as we go along today, feel free to use the chat function. We'll have people answering questions, and I will try to monitor it as well. So again, thank you to our panelists. What I'd like to do, just to start off, just to put a face with a name, is I call on each one of you. Lester's already given you a little bit about you. Maybe just after I call on you, give us again your role within your company, and maybe your main takeaway during this time as it relates to your profession, be it commercial, being a commercial realtor, appraiser, banker, what have you. So I'm going to start off with Gantt Hill out of Louisville. Gant, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Gantt Hill with Gantt Hill and Associates. We have about 50 or so colleagues that work with us. We are busy, but we're cautious. Our volume is down, but values are still remaining pretty solid. We do it all from residential transactions to hospitality to retail to industrial office, multifamily, et cetera. And we're finding that we're getting a lot of activity in our multifamily, and some business opportunities seem to be moving okay. Land is of interest, but most industrial and multifamily, I think, are going to be pretty good. We're a little slow on office and retail, as to be expected, but we're hanging in there. Thank you for having me.
Good. Yeah, thank you. All right, next I'm going to switch over to Madison Silver. Madison, how are things going in Owensboro?
Thanks, Lamont. A little bit about us. The Malcolm Bryant Corporation is a multi-generational family business that I was honored to be able to ask to be president a few years ago. And our company is a full-service real estate developer specializing in hospitality and commercial office, but we also have residential and industrial as well. And I will say thank God for every other part of the business other than hospitality right now. I think we're very fortunate that we're a diverse company that's involved in a lot of different areas of real estate. But I think we're hanging in there, and I think Owensboro is hanging in there as well.
Good. All right. Thank you. Tim Brown, thanks for being with us today. How are things going on at Hoagland Commercial Real Estate in Louisville?
Yeah, hey Lamont, thanks for having us. Yeah, we're doing good. I mean, we're a kind of large independent brokerage in Louisville here. I mean, brokerage is definitely down. We do a lot of, office and flex space, and it's certainly, significantly down at the moment in terms of people out looking and number of calls and deals happening. We also kind of own and manage about 1 million square feet of space around town, and probably that's our biggest goal at the moment, is just keeping on top of that and getting these rents in, because that's the biggest challenge we're having right now. Is our commercial tenants going to pay rent? For April, it's looking pretty good. I mean, we've got about 80% of the rents in, but May, I think, is going to be really hard, and June's going to be tough as well. So we're dealing with a lot of tenants who are coming to us asking for concessions, and it's kind of how we navigate that and work our way through that. It's kind of occupying a lot of our time right now.
Good. Yeah, that's seems to be what I've read, that May is going to be the real month that will be determining maybe where we're going in the next few months. Okay, thank you. And let's go over to Stephen Rolfing, who is an appraiser. What's going on with you, Stephen?
Well, we're still staying busy too. Realty Research is a commercial-only appraisal company, and what we're seeing is it's kind of a little early yet to see what exactly is going to happen with a lot of these sectors, other than like already been mentioned, hospitality, which has taken a beating. But we know there's going to be some devaluations. It's just how much and to what extent. And it's just talking to market participants. We're kind of surmising what's going on in some of these sectors, but it's really segmented. To give you an example, even like multifamily, with upper scales doing fine and student rental housing doing fine, but properties in lower demographic areas are obviously having some rent abatement trouble. So we're just kind of going through trying to figure it out at this point, because we deal with historic data. That's all we have so far. So it's just kind of looking into the future.
Got it. Makes sense. Thanks, Stephen. I'm going to switch over to my good friend, Andrew Holden in Louisville. Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm great, Lamont. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here. I'm the market president in Louisville for Park National Bank. We're an $8.5 billion community bank with offices in Ohio, Kentucky, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And for the last 6 weeks or so, we've just spent all our time trying to help our clients as best we can. And interestingly enough, we've actually been fairly busy with new opportunities. Now, they've all been refinances. All but one purchase we were working on has terminated. But it's been nice that we've been able to help people reposition some property with interest rates where they are.
Good. Okay. Thank you. John Baughman, commercial lending over at First Financial Bank in Louisville. How you doing, John?
Well, thanks, Lamont. Thanks for having me on. But, similar to Andrew, we've been really busy, obviously, with processing the paycheck protection applications. Overwhelming response there. One of the biggest things is folks that have employees need to be certainly looking at that as a new round of funding is coming. And the other we were pretty preoccupied with prior to the PPP are making sure that as tenants are slowing down their pay, making sure that we're deferring some of the payments for our existing customers, especially if you're not receiving rents, it's hard to make your payments. So we've pretty much been blanket deferring payments for 90 days to try to help folks out in this unprecedented time.
That's good. Thank you, John. Let's switch over. Kent Daly out of Northern Kentucky. Are you on the call?
I'm here.
Okay. Hey, Kent, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. We're still not experiencing a whole lot of downturn just yet, but we're starting to feel different things. I mean, I just read a report from CoStar a few minutes ago that 17% of the anticipated closings for the month of April in their statistics that they keep have already fallen out, and that's just 3 weeks into the month. So we're definitely seeing that. We're seeing people starting to invoke some language, using language in some of these contracts. I never knew what force majeure really meant until about 2 weeks ago. It was an inactive clause in almost every lease that I've ever seen. And yet I've got several clients that own triple net lease properties, and they learned real quickly what it meant. So for those of you that don't know what that is, it basically says in the event of some unforeseen disaster that they can call timeout basically on it. So we've been renegotiating with a lot of our people. We've got a lot of investors that own these triple net lease properties, and they basically just called them and said, hey, we're not paying for the next 90 days. And I've got investors scrambling because sometimes that's their entire income off of that. So we've been dealing with a little bit of that, but mostly we work on projects here in Northern Kentucky and site selection, and all of the ones that I'm working on are still in progress. Most of them have invoked a little extension on their due diligence because nobody really knows where we're going. But like the rest of you, I think the retail and the office market is going to be pretty interesting moving forward. I think occupancy rates are going to go down on offices as everybody's learned how to work from home. It already wasn't that good in Northern Kentucky. Our distribution warehouse business is through the roof up here. If you haven't driven to Northern Kentucky lately, drive around to Cincinnati Airport and everybody and their mother is chasing Amazon around out there. We got super sized facilities. So that part of the market's going pretty good. But overall, I think, it's just a change. I think there are some people out there trying to make deals right now. There's some thieves started circling in the water, trying to make some lower offers, but by and large, I think we're still doing fairly decent.
Great, thank you. All right, so you mentioned Amazon and that type of thing. I'm going to open it up to the panel here. So you've got retail, you've got office, hospitality, multifamily, and then industrial. Obviously, there's some folks that are losing in that group. Are there any winners right now? Anybody want to take that one?
I will. There's no winners right now. The only thing I think that's not going to be affected is light industrial office warehouse, especially in the Lexington market, maybe storage units, things like that. But everything else to some degree is going to be affected. The worst, hospitality, retail, office, then probably into multifamily to some degree.
Anybody else? So as I look at office, obviously that is a one that is very volatile right now. There's an obvious concern that people and companies are going to take a broader look down the road. Do we need as much space as we have now? And then I see where companies like Staples and others, apparently, from what I see, are voluntarily are making the choice not to make their rent payments in order to try to gain some type of advantage down the road. What do you do if you're a small business and you can't pay your rent right now? Should you be proactive or should you just not answer the phone?
Lamont, that's a great question because I think we've been very, very compassionate to our people, and one of the things that we've realized very quickly is that the the PPP loan program, I think, has had the unintended consequence of having people wait to pay rent. The common statement is, I'm waiting on my SBA loan, because they want to be able to use that money in a forgivable fashion, and they're very much hoping that we'll be able to accommodate that whenever they get their money. Some of them have and have paid, and some of them have not. But one of the unintended consequences of that program, no doubt, has been a delay in payment of rent. I think for the most part, our customers have appreciated a thoughtful approach to them and a patient approach to them. And for the most part, really all but just a very, very small few have been more than willing to take my call and talk to me about it. In fact, the vast majority have called before I did. To have that kind of relationship with them is important in times like these.
Good. Anybody else?
I could say that in our situation, our multifamily properties have increased significantly in occupancy. We probably had about a 10% increase in overall occupancy over all the properties. And a lot of it's because we kind of entered a period where we had some tenants vacate right before, and we filled a lot of that back up. So multifamily is doing really well. As far as the other occupants that we work with and we manage, I just think, as was mentioned just a few moments ago, communication is key, and being proactive about talking to the tenants and understanding what their needs are and where they stand is our tactic, and it seems to be working pretty well.
Good.
I'd certainly agree. I think on the more discussed with the tenants, and it's on a sort of, it changes every week as to what's happening on who's getting PPP, and with this new second round, I think that's going to help a lot. But we're trying to be helpful to tenants. I think they're going to remember this. This is a unprecedented time, and I think tenant relations are really important right now. And for those tenants who haven't got PPP, and if they don't get it, or if they're too big to get it but their income has dropped off, we're certainly looking at talking to them about whether we defer the rent for 3 months for May, June, and July, and then look to get paid back maybe over a 6-month period or during the course of next year. Or also, if lease is coming up fairly soon, do we abate their rent for 3 months, and then so they actually don't pay the rent, but then we get an extension on their lease, which will be good for us if they're a good credit tenant. But it's a question of how long you want that extension to be, because a lot of the tenants are saying, well, if you let me off for 3 months, give you a 3-month extension, and a lot of the landlords are saying, well, if I let you off the rent for 3 months, 3-year extension. There's a lot of those discussions going on right now.
Good. John Baughman, I know you all are doing your fair share of payroll protection program applications. Anyway, have you guys started funding, and what kind of issues are you all experiencing with that program?
Sure. Thanks, Lamont. Good question. We had an overwhelming response to the PPP applications. We took about 7,500 applications for about $1.2 billion. So you're talking about 8% of our total asset size. Banks were charged with taking their own approach, and it's been a pretty wide response, some positive and some negative. For us, we took the approach of delaying on the funding to try to reserve as much from an E-Tran standpoint and as much money with the SBA to try to get the largest number of loans funded. And then we shifted resources over at the start of this week to produce loan documents. And so it's been a little slower in documents coming out than we anticipated. So it is kind of a slow process for us, but we anticipate it picking up. Right now we're getting about 100 loan packages out a day. We need that to be triple to get the loans done in time. So we've added some resources and allocated to that to try to help speed up that process.
So if someone did not get in on the first round, let's say they didn't even get their application in, with this second round of funding looking like it's going to happen today, might have already happened, would you recommend that they get back online and get those applications in, or is it too late now because of the backlog?
Right, good question. Anyone who's already applied, I believe most banks universally have taken this approach. You want to leave your application in there. It'll stay somewhat in line where it was received. We've continued to process them, so they'll be ready for the new round of funding. You're accurate. I think it's set to happen at some point today via the House, and then probably signed late by the president late in the day. And then we expect funding maybe to start as early as tomorrow back in the program. If you didn't apply, a lot of banks are not going to open it back up because there's so many in the backlog. But if you have not applied, your bank is going to accept applications. First Financial is going to. You definitely want to have your ducks in a row and be ready, prepared to apply for that.
Okay, thanks, John. Got a question from one of our viewers here. It says, and in Somerset, they've heard several businesses, both food service and other retailers, state that they will not be reopening. Is anyone else around the state hearing that same thing? Anybody?
Lamont, I'll take that one if you want. It's Kent Daly again.
Please.
We are seeing that. I've got a few restaurant clients, and the real bottom line is most of them don't have a lot of reserves. Most of those are small businesses and don't have the reserves. But even some of the larger ones, we had a triple net lease property ready to go. It was supposed to close this week. 2 weeks ago, there's a national restaurant tenant, I won't say who it is, and they called and told the landlord, "Hey, we're not going to reopen, period." So we were 2 weeks away from closing this thing, and the deal blew up. And now an investor's sitting on a property that can't do anything with right now. But even a lot of the other restaurants, my friends that own the restaurants are saying they don't see themselves coming back really until September or later, because these kids that they hire into these restaurants are now getting more money on unemployment than they would be making in the restaurants. And they're not going to come back to work. When they can make $1,000 and not work a week, they're not going to come back to work for $500 a week. So most of them are really struggling with how they're going to restaff when they're able to reopen. And then combined with the fact that there's probably going to be social distancing and tables 6 feet apart, and most of the small ones don't have dining room space for that. So I think the restaurant segment is a big time hurt on the short term. I think they'll come back, but I think short term it's going to be a big problem.
That's good. Anybody else? This may be an Andrew or a John question, but let's say you have let's say you are a landlord who has a mortgage, and your restaurant business that takes up 90 to 100% of your space just cannot reopen, and it doesn't look like they're going to for a while. Are the banks going to be doing any type, and I know you don't want to show your hand too much, but are the banks going to be doing any type of forbearance requests, or I saw something on the CCIM website, pre-negotiation agreements, that kind of thing? What are forbearance requests and pre-negotiation agreements?
Hey, Lamont, I'll jump in, and then John can play cleanup. I mean, at this point, we've just been getting requests from clients looking for either 90 days interest only or 90 days deferral, just so we all have more information to make a better decision. And I think that's really what's going to happen. Customers are going to call and say, "Hey, the chicken store is closed, and we need some time to market it for a new tenant, and we can either do A or we can do B, and we're going to have to make decisions and work with clients the best we can." I mean, this is a situation that they and we have found ourselves in through no fault of anyone. So, we're going to be incumbent upon us to all work together to try to find a solution where we can. Now, like in most crises, hope is not a strategy. So we have to have a plan to get out of it. But as long as there's a plan that makes sense and is viable, I think most banks generally are going to work with customers.
Good. John, anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add to that is a lot of the SBA loans that are already out there, the SBA is making their payments for 6 months. So the bank is still receiving that income. And for the most part, similar to what Andrew said, we're pretty much blanketing anyone who says they need the forbear to push back, defer loan payments. where basically there's not even really an approval process. You fill out a quick form and it's pushed back for 90 days. And just like Andrew said, I think most banks have adopted that policy because we ultimately want to see customers who are successful and come out of it the other end versus digging a deeper hole.
I think to add to that, if I might, Lamont, that
Please.
that patience is such a virtue in this, and we have had commercial office customers and other customers who whose first reaction was, I don't think I'm going to open back up, and I can't pay you April's rent, and have paid us April's rent, and for some that we're going to close down already May, and I think they've gotten to the other side and said, look, we're going to be okay. We freaked out a little bit for a moment, and we've sat down and looked at what the long term, and we've worked with our bankers, and they have helped us out, and we're going to keep going. I think that we all have to remember that there is another side to this, and giving up too quickly for our customers is often not the best strategy. And our responsibility, I think, sometimes as lessors, is to help them understand those resources and to give them some hope. And while it's not a strategy, it's impossible to think strategically without it.
That's a good point. And I was just thinking, I read one of our guests last week said that they recommended that any PPP funds, they should open up a separate bank account just for those funds so that they can account for those down the road. What can landlords and commercial realtors even do to kind of coach their small business tenants on how best, they may know how to make the best chicken wing in America, but they may not be the best at finances. Is there some sort of resource where, because the key is to get this forgiven, right? And if you don't do it right, the 75 and 25%, that could be a problem, another unintended consequence down the road if those funds are required to be paid back. Anything any of you all are doing or could do to help your small business tenants get through this with the PPP loans?
I'll say that we're certainly connecting them to bankers. That's the first thing. So if we get a deferral request from a customer, our first question is always, have you looked into the PPP loan program or an emergency disaster loan program from the SBA? And you would be shocked at the number of people who don't know what I'm talking about when I get those calls. And so for a lot of them, it opens up a dialogue with their banker for other things, not just a PPP loan, or discussions with the SBA for other things, because they have other resources as well. So just making sure that your customers understand what's out there to help right now is probably the best thing we can do.
Good. Anybody else before we move on? All right, so one of the questions here has to do with when people that have been working from home, finally, if they've not gone crazy, their bosses may decide that that's not a bad deal to have them do WebEx and Zoom and that type of thing. Is there anything, I guess, looking at more co-working, more shared space, do you think we'll see more of that in the next year to 2 years? Of course, you see WeWork, they're kind of the pioneer in all this. Of course, I think they made some bad decisions, but they are withholding rent in order to renegotiate, but maybe they were not too big to fail. Any thoughts on that type of thing?
I mean, I can address that. From an appraisal standpoint, we're going to see office vacancy increase to more in the 10 or 11% range, is what the projections I'm seeing. And then there's going to be a downward pressure on rents. And then, for short-term people, as well as when these office tenants come to renew, they're going to try to expect a lower rent in the process as well. So I think as long as development of new office space kind of stays pretty stagnant, it'll eventually kind of catch up, but we're probably talking 2023, 24 before it probably gets back to the level where it is today. But I think you're going to see a definite pullback of probably 10% or so in the office thing, with definitely increased vacancy and decreased rents.
Good.
Yeah.
Anybody?
be real tough as well, because I was just reading a JLL report, and they were saying that 34% of employees today expect to go back to work in the office on a full-time basis, with no portion of their work taking place at home. Like 2/3 of the people are saying they are expecting to do some kind of work from home in the future, which is, you know, absolutely huge. And I think now that people are realizing that you can work from home and that people can be productive, you know, they're going to want part of their, week to actually include, you know, some definite period of working from home. And when they do go into the office, they're going to be kind of scared as, has someone been sitting in my desk, and am I going to kind of catch something from being in here? And are we all going to be, having to have sort of staggered start times? And, you know, especially when we start going back to work, are we going to be having alternate days, alternating days that, half the team comes in on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the other half, on different days? I think just getting people back into the routine is going to be difficult. And it's going to have a real long-lasting effect, on the office market as a whole.
That's good. Thanks, Tim. Anybody else? So I've got a question here for our lenders. In a nutshell, it says, since you all are so busy dealing with these SBA loans, are you all looking for any new opportunities? Are you all lending on anything else right now?
We certainly are. I mean, I just started a new request today. So obviously we have to take a little more time to understand the mechanics and global cash flow, et cetera, today than perhaps where we normally would have spent our time. But we're still open for business. We're still looking at deals. Obviously certain asset classes are tougher than others, but we continue to look at all asset classes and would certainly extend credit for good borrowers, regardless of what the short-term view might look like.
And what about down payment requirements? I've heard a couple transactions recently where they were well into the transaction and the bank decided instead of 20%, they needed 30%. Do you see that type of thing?
Well, we normally try to figure that out on the front end, and we work very hard to not have to go back with a pivot if we have to via committee. But we generally size the deal based upon what we think is right at the front end, and the down payment really is going to depend on what the economics of the project and what the global cash flow looks like.
And a follow-up question was, in this environment, what asset types do you really want in this environment? Any thoughts on that? I don't want to just pick on Andrew. Any of you all. Don't be shy. You're commercial guys.
I'll jump in. From a lending standpoint at the bank, we've been busy. We're so busy and overwhelmed with the PPP. We are still taking new applications and new opportunities for what I would call traditional loans. However, it's so much slower to get through the process that we're somewhat encouraging that volume to remain pretty low, which is interesting because we've had a number of requests. There, as far as I would think your major national tenants would be the best asset class you'd want to go after. If you can target some of those would be ideal. Obviously, the mom and pops are certainly going to have a hard time. Restaurants, gas stations, those things are really, really struggling, who we're getting a lot of questions on and seeking relief.
Good. Anybody else? We got about just a few more minutes here. Any other things you all want to bring up? Anything you would like to say while we've got this group together, and we've got, I don't know how many we've got on the call, over 100, I think. Anything at all?
Yeah, I'll say something. I mean, there was a question over there looking outlook 3 to 6 months with possible defaults. The CoStar suggests that as these defaults rise, so are going to be distressed sales, and we're going to have distressed sales maybe get up into the 5 or 6% range, which sounds bad, and that's when appraisers tend to get a little busier. But it's also an opportunity for some real estate people as well. There's a lot of people out there still looking for deals and sitting on significant amounts of money. So I think there's still going to be opportunities, albeit at the expense of other people, I guess, but there's going to be some distressed sales and opportunities to still buy some good real estate and sit on it for a year or two and create some value.
Good. Anybody else?
Steve, I agree with that. And I was telling somebody earlier today, they were freaking out about the stock market. And I said, what do you think Warren Buffett's doing right now? I said, he's out buying. You know, America's on sale 40, 50% off right now. And some of our real estate investors are starting to think that same way, Steve. You're starting to see it already. Those with cash are probably going to be in a pretty good position to pick up some things because there's going to be some big holes. You know, we already were having trouble with big boxes in some of our retail centers, putting people in them. And now we got everybody working from home and ordering from Amazon. That's not going to get better. So I think there will be things out there, but you know, coming from 45 years plus doing real estate, there's never been anything known as a normal market that I've ever seen. We've had buyers markets, sellers markets, you know, this segment up, that segment down. I remember 19% interest rates in residential. You know, it's just, you just have to adapt to what's out there. But I think the short terms, I think we're going to struggle with some of the small businesses that just didn't have the assets to get through this thing, because there's really there's no script for us to get through this. You know, we're working it a day at a time, but I like the things I'm hearing out of Madison and Gant, you know, is it's time for communication and, you know, keep that communication line open with everybody and try to play win-win. I think everybody can come out okay, but there's going to be some segments that are going to definitely hurt, but that also creates those opportunities, as Steve's saying, for other investors to step in.
And Ken, I think to that point, Lamont, there's been some clarifications and changes in the tax law through this CARES Act that I think highly depreciable classes of assets. We talked about rental units for storage earlier, and that's certainly one where investors who can capture back their taxes that they've paid over the last 5 years by purchasing some highly depreciable assets that are going to be very, very attractive to people. I think once they get out from underneath the deluge of information that they're getting right now and start to realize that those asset classes are going to get purchased very quickly and at a premium.
Good. So one last question here. I think we've all seen all of the multifamily seems to be going up everywhere. That sector's been on fire. How is all this going to affect that? Are there going to be people to fill all those apartments, and will that continue? Anybody want to take that? I'll take that as a no.
I mean, I will.
Yeah.
There's people are always going to need a place to live. So I think the multifamily in the long run is going to be the least affected by this, except for, like I said, low demographic. A lot of this new stuff going up is more luxury, more upper income. I don't think that stuff's going to skip a beat. Now they'll probably slow down on development because, as a couple of bankers have said, we're not actively doing lending on those, but everything that's in process will ultimately fill up because people still need a place to live regardless. So I think multifamily is going to be the least affected by this long term, and that's just my opinion from what I'm talking about, you know, with market participants.
And I will also say that multifamily is the way to go right now. We're showing all the time. I mean, it's been incredible, and rental housing and even Airbnb, since it was formerly a condo or an apartment or a house, it also works well because people are needing to quarantine somewhere.
Right.
But, and also industrial's been really hot. I found we've been showing a lot of that. In a market like ours in the state of Kentucky, we're such a great industrial market to the world, essentially, that's going to continue to be a really positive area. But multifamily is great. I'd say continue building and build with office space or something inside your unit.
Good. Well, all of you all, and we'll close with this, have talked about showings and that type of thing. How has social distancing affected the commercial market, closings, showings, that type of thing? Is it PPE? What is it? What are y'all doing?
FaceTime.
FaceTime. There you go.
Yeah, we've done some virtual showings with our phone. We've done some people who just aren't comfortable with that. We've done with PPE, but we've done some with FaceTime, and we've sold some that way. So it's been good.
Good.
In the closings in the commercial side, Lamont, most of those have never, I wouldn't say never, but very few of those are face-to-face anyway. They're usually paper flying back and forth. And I think residential is probably going to follow the lead of commercial. We've not sat at the table with the people typically on a commercial closing.
Interesting. Okay, everybody. I want to thank you all for being with us and taking 45 minutes out of your day. I think it's been a very productive time, and we hope you all have a great rest of the year, and please keep in touch. And we as President Sanders said, we do have another Thursday next week, a town hall meeting. We're going to focus more on mental health and how, as we're quarantined, that we can kind of get through this thing day to day. Lester, I'm going to turn it back to you.
I'll simply again say thanks. This meeting has been important. It's been extremely informative, and we're all in this business called real estate together. So we really appreciate, like Lamont said, you giving your time, and it won't be long, who knows, that we might be knocking on your door again saying, help, can you come back, and are you willing to address our group again? And we oftentimes get questions that will continue to come in after the meeting is over, or at least until it's over. So hopefully you'll be willing to answer, help us answer those questions as we try to get back with our membership as well. So again, just thank you for participating today. We really appreciate you.